Hello everybody, this is Garrett from 11 Bang Bang, and today we have two very interesting rifles here on the table. A few years ago we did some gun auction action videos, if you want to go back and check those out. And we haven't done any for quite a while because, to be quite honest, this is not the time to be going to gun auctions looking for deals. The time to do that on antique firearms is when there is a panic and a rush going on and everybody wanting to buy AR-15s. That's when you go out and get good deals on antique rifles. But here lately, everybody's selling their AR-15s and looking into antique rifles again, and the prices have just gone through the roof. A few years ago, we were doing things like picking up Colt pocket models for $600 or $700 at these auctions. Now you can't touch them for $15, and they're just getting more expensive. They will go back down, and that's how you play the game when you're a collector. Know when to buy, know when not to buy. Right now is not the time to buy, but my uncle was actually rummaging around a couple auctions today, and he called me up and said that there was a couple interesting old rifles we might want to take a look at. And I agreed, because he sent me some pictures, and these were two of them. He also bought a World War II flare gun, but that's a story for another day. But these rifles I find very, very interesting, because luckily both of these guns, uncommon to most rifles like this, have makers' names and marks on them. And I don't know a whole lot about them yet, other than what those initial big, easy to read markings say. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you kind of down the journey with us. We're going to find out all we can about these two rifles, and we are going to, I'll tell you what I know about the names, and we're going to completely disassemble them as far as we dare and see what might possibly be wrong with them. Alright. So, what do we have here on the table? This one here is very interesting. This is a very plain rifle. And if you look down here, you can see the end cap is missing. Somebody broke said end cap off, it looks like, and then just sawed the stock off right there. And I did some research on it. Right here on the top, it says in Mall. And I'll show you that in a minute in the markings section. But I discovered that stood for Nathan Mall. And Nathan Mall was actually a member of the Mall family of gun builders from Pennsylvania. They had been a German family, I guess, that had been building guns ever since before the Revolutionary War. Had helped supply rifles to the Continental Army, and then actually had some contracts out for rifles in the War of 1812. And their family was John I, John II, John III, and Johannes was the oldest one, and they were a family of gun makers, and Nathan was actually the son of John III, as far as I understand, and he would have took over the business maybe mid 1830s to 1840s when he really started taking things over. And his name in Mall is actually in brass right here on the top of the gun. So this is a Nathan Mall rifle, and he was actually a gun builder. As things went on and the family moved around, he built this gun in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, right outside of Quakerstown, I think it's called. But it's a Bucks County rifle, but it is a cap lock. And that's about what we know about it. It is a cap lock. It's of a small caliber. We'll figure that out here in a minute. It's kind of a squirrel rifle with a big heavy barrel, but I don't believe this is the original ramrod that went with the gun, but they were known for making plain rifles. And as the 1840s turned into the 1850s, they started stamping these brass nameplates on the top that we'll look at in a minute. They started doing ducks and geese engraving on the lock, and there was a little bit of fancier design down here on the butt plate and the trigger guard. Now, what surprises me about this gun, we'll get to it in a little bit, is I believe that sometime, probably not long after it was built, this gun was restocked. This stock is very old, but there are some telltale signs that tell me this is not the original stock to this gun, besides the fact that the nose cap has been broke off. But we're going to go ahead and lay this down for just a minute, because that's kind of the plain working man's gun. And let's go back here to this one. Now this one is very interesting. We have some really nice tiger stripe maples here, but this is a really nice aged patinaed rifle. This is not a working man's rifle. This is a high-end rifle. Now this rifle here is actually made by J.M. Burns. And the Burns family were gun makers out of Ohio. And there's actually 3 or 4 members of that family. And the J.M. Burns guns, this one right here, will date anywhere from 1845 to 1855. And what they were known for was making heavy-barreled high-end target rifles, and that's exactly what this is. They made them from 30 to 40 caliber. Some things about this rifle: very nice brass work here, inlays. Somebody at some point has broken the stock, and a lot of times when you see a cracked wrist like this, you'll see a pin running through it or wrapped in rawhide. Not this one. It was sent back in, and this ornate piece of brass was overlaid over the brake. The brake was fixed correctly, and this very ornate piece of brass was inlaid back in there to make it look nice. So I believe that was probably done by the same family. Now this one does have a ramrod with it. Unfortunately, it's stuck inside the barrel. Something else we're going to have to work on here. The hammer on this gun does not fall all the way down onto the nipple, and someone has replaced the hammer screw with something, I'm not sure at all what it is. But so what we're dealing with here is a squirrel rifle of 30 to 40 caliber. We'll see in a minute. Made in Ohio in roughly 1845 to 1855. Now some of the pictures of ones I've seen on the internet seem to indicate that since this is not a backlock, this is probably an 1850 or later Burns rifle. Very heavy barreled. The balance on this gun is actually clear up here, but it's not bad at all. Just a nice, handy, and both of these are small caliber. So without further ado, let's get one of them off the table. Let's start out by breaking into this Maul gun, and we're going to see what we got going on. Alright guys, don't mind the little spots. We are looking through a magnified light here. We're going to do this lock, stock, and barrel the way you should. Now I want to point this out, and I don't know if it will become more clear. Alright, so we have what appears to be a goose that is flying over a marshland here. We have some floral engraving going all the way up this hammer. Interestingly enough, no knurl on top of the hammer. Now this is very common for cap locks of the era. You'll see they've hit that cap so many times they tend to blow the cone out around the hammer. It's no big deal if you get in there and just kind of file that down sharper, or not sharp, but file that down flat again. Now over here is something interesting. We have what looks to be a maker's name, but you can't make it out, but you can see the line that would go under it. And I see what, and it doesn't really show up on this camera because the angle's not right, but there appears to be an A, and I don't know what the rest of that would be. And then over here we have some more floral designs. Like I said, pardon the yellow light and the, there we go. So over here we have some more floral designs, and if you look here, you can barely make out this fancy little line going along here, where there's probably a lock maker's name on top of this. Possibly the Maul family lock. I don't know if they made their locks or they brought them in from England or somewhere else. A lot of times that did happen. Now if we look over here, we see what is one of the main issues with this gun. Something's missing, aka the mainspring. However, everything else, including the tumbler, and here appears to be here. Now what we're going to have to do with this is take and place it in a ultrasonic cleaner, and then do a very detailed clean and get all this rust out of this lock. We almost couldn't get this lock out because this is a brass screw. And as you can see, we had to mar the head a little bit, and we wound up cutting a deeper groove because the groove was all but gone, and it was completely set in there. We had to take the barrel out and then grab it from the center eventually to get it out, but it's a very corroded screw. So one other thing that's going on with this lock that will require some attention. What we're dealing with here is the hammer with these little grooves on it is not grabbing the main body there because the grooves have worn, which means we're going to have to build up the inside of that right there where those grooves are worn down. Let's see what we got going on with the stock. Alright, so let's take a look at the stock here. Now, this is pretty interesting. I believe this gun was restocked early on because this stock is obviously very old and very well used. But if you look at this butt plate here, this is what appears to be a Maul style butt plate, and the other guns had patch boxes. And if you look right here, you can see the cutout for the patch box lid, and down here the area where the button would go. And so I believe this gun was restocked early on, probably got broken and they just sent it in and got a stock put on it, or somebody at home did. But I also think maybe this is a homemade deal because not every edge is just fit as it should be for these guns. So one of the reasons I believe this to be an 1840s gun is because, like, look at this toe plate here. This is supposedly when they started putting a little bit more fancy engraving on these things, and you can see we have this floral design and then these little dots that go all the way around the entire toe plate. Very well done. Like I said, I don't feel that that goes with the stock, because if you look here, the inletting is not the best, and I honestly think somebody tried to attach the old pieces to a newer stock. Now, I'm not going to take all that brass off because it's just not necessary. We will clean it up. We won't take the patina off, I promise, but we are going to clean it up and get things like corrosion, is the word I'm looking for. There's a little bit of that around there. Now let's go on down the stock and take a look what's going on in the middle. Now, as you can see, even though this is a restock gun, in my opinion, we have a cracked wrist. Pretty common for these kind of guns. And this really can't be from recoil with this gun. So I have a feeling it was dropped or something happened that caused to break this whole kind of fragile small piece out. You can see it's glued in. It's also held with 2 small nails, and it was probably done a very long time ago. But anyway, moving on, we did not take the entry pipe or the ramrod pipes out because I don't feel that's necessary and can cause undue damage to this already damaged old stock. So as I was just moving the stock around, this old fragment here actually started to break. Something you have to be very careful of with these old stocks, because it's just so thin right there. All I did was place my thumb on it and it broke in my hand. I do have some glue. We will fix that up. I'm pretty good at fixing such cracks, but it was already started. Literally, I just placed my thumb on it and it broke. One of the reasons I have these gloves on, and one of these reasons you have to be very careful. Now, if you look right here, this is obviously where the front hand went when this gun was shot, and it was shot a lot. And this is worn out where the hand either carried the gun, probably like this, or where the shooting took place. And it's not just a break, because as you can see on this side, it has that, but it's also worn, whoops, let me turn this around, in the exact same pattern on this side. This is from years and years of someone carrying this rifle in the exact same place with their hand right there. Literally wore the wood off. Okay, so I do believe that this stock once had a nose cap, and it broke, and it's obvious they just cut it off where the nose cap inletting was and just left it wide open. Now that's not good for long term because rain and everything else can get in there, but it seemed to work all right on this gun. Without further ado, we're going to carefully put this stock away and go look at the barrel. So let's take a look at this barrel, and amazingly, we were able to, with very little pressure and just a nipple wrench, get the nipple out of the bolster here, and that is very amazing. Likely never happens. I don't know if you can see it there, but the nipple is clear, and we will put that aside for later. Now, the only real marking on this gun is right here, and it's kind of hard to make out because there's a dent right here in the front of this M, but it's N period M-O-L-L, which is the marking for Nathan Mall of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And you can tell that originally there was some fancy work done right up here, probably a little brass ring inserted, not inserted I should say, but probably inlaid right there, and all that remains, because it's obviously where most people would carry the gun, all that remains is a very little indent there. Alright, so we see the pin loops that hold the gun in the stock. There's one there, and it's very interesting how they did that. It looks like it's cut into place and then pressed in. By the way, we have our standard buckhorn sight here, which is pushed off to one side ever so slightly off to the left, and then it looks like it's hammered in place, so evidently that's where it was shooting, hopefully. But as we go down here, we will see this one is completely missing, and we actually found it in the stock when we took the stock apart right there, and the pin that went through it was broken. Now somebody has tried to either epoxy or braze that on at some point, and it didn't work, and we're going to have to go back in there and fix that. And down here on the very end, you will see we have our front loop and our front sight, very small fine front sight, and I believe that this is where those 2 dots go, is probably where the nose cap went before it was completely removed. Alright, before we're done here, we're going to take a look at this bore and try to determine what size this rifle is. One more thing to note, I just noticed here, there is another small area where it looks like a brass or something inlaid right about the same distance away from this front sight was right here. Now, I also noticed that, interestingly enough, this sight is way off to the left, same as the rear sight. So, interesting. I would also say that, in my opinion, this sight is placed in here backwards because the longer portion of it is going to the front. So, interesting things there. Like I said, I personally date this gun with that in-mall marking on it, at least everything but the stock, to about the 1840s, just because of the engraving that's done on the brass. Alright, well, Caleb broke the magnifying light stand. Way to go.
Better than breaking the stock.
Anyway, if you look down here, you'll see we have some rifling. 7-groove rifling. And we don't know exactly what size this is, but we're about to find out. Alright guys, so I just ran these and I did it off camera because it was easier for me to see. But we wound up doing here is we have a 3.60 in the lands and a 3.75 in the grooves, making this a 36 caliber squirrel rifle. Okay, so I actually do have with me here a 3.50, and I'm going to try to do this without rolling it all the way down the barrel, getting it stuck, obviously. A 3.50 Hornady swaged with a patch, that would be perfect. Alright, so down here we have our set triggers, pretty common for a squirrel rifle of this era. You really need an accurate gun to make those little headshots at 50, 25, 50 yards. It almost works, but we do have an issue of the top of that sear on the set trigger is worn and is no longer engaging. So, to make this work, what we have to do is pull the pins, and we're not going to do it here, obviously, because we are going to take this thing 100% apart, everything on it, to wash it in the ultrasonic cleaner, which will be a video for another day. But when we do, we will take this and we will heat it, put it on an anvil, and ever so slightly tap it to drive it out just a touch longer. And what that does is it spreads the metal out, makes it extend, and it will actually grab in there, and we'll have a decent set of set triggers. So let's put this gun back together and talk about what all we got to do to it. Okay guys, so what did we learn about this particular rifle? What is it? What do we need to do to it? Well, we know that this rifle was made by Nathan Mall in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. By the way, there's some online sources for the Mall Gunsmiths of Pennsylvania. If you want to look them up, I don't have the book yet, but Turkey Creek 1823 has sent me a list of books I need for these particular style of rifles. But we do know that since it has the engraving on it, and they didn't start doing that till the mid-1840s, that this is presumably mid-1840s to early 1850s, because the Malls actually in the 1860s would quit making this kind of thing and start actually working on government contract weapons. Let me get that rag up there. But anyway, so you're looking at 45 to 59, somewhere in there. And it is one of my all-time favorite rifles. This is a 36 caliber long squirrel rifle, but it's a late Bucks County rifle. Cap lock, what do we need to do if we decide to make this run? First of all, we're going to have to go in and completely rebuild this small area here and a few others where the wood is just so fragile and so thin. This is just not to make this gun perfect. We're never going to erase all the patina off of this. This would be a shame. But we would, if we came back in here, I would probably, seeing as the nipple is clear and it actually threads in and out all right, we would leave it there, but I would come in and square up this hammer nose where it's blown out by caps. We would also have to come down here onto this square and build it up and file it to fit in the hammer, replace the front spring, fix the middle loop and pin. I would probably leave the end of the gun as is because that's part of the story of this gun. Obviously this has been restocked at some time in its life. And other than that, I think, well, other than making a ramrod for it, it would not take more than a week probably worth of labor to clean this gun, which we are going to clean it up and get the corrosion off of it, not the patina. Don't take the patina off of a gun like this, but we are going to get the corrosion off and stop any further rusting. We will clean the barrel thoroughly. Like I said, ultrasonic clean all the small parts. But yes, late Bucks County rifle in .36 caliber. Nice heavy squirrel rifle. More of a kind of a target rifle because the barrel does not appear to be swamped. It's just kind of straight. I mean, it's kind of a heavy duty dude out front. So, without further ado, that's all we have for the maul gun. Now let's go take a look at the one we're kind of excited about. Let's take a look at that Burns gun from Ohio. Alright, so let's take a look at this Burns rifle. J.M. Burns or J.H. Burns. Their names are both on this rifle and they are brothers. Now, as I said before, this gun has some issues, but we can pretty well trace this gun because of the 3 major markings that it has on it that we'll look at here in just a minute. We can trace this gun to about 1850 for its style. The super deep comb drop here. And this one is going to be interesting because I don't think this one's a 36. But we will find out when we get there. Alright, so without further ado, we're going to do our best to very carefully take this beautiful old maple stock gun down and see what is going on. Why will this hammer not go all the way down on the nipple? Alright, so we have some floral work here, a little bit of floral work going up and down the hammer. Once again, you see the blown out hammer nose. It's pretty common for this type of gun. And no more knurling on this hammer either, but we do have a marking here. This is the Philadelphia Rifle Works. Now, I don't know if that is where the Burns people or brothers or family purchased their locks from, but obviously that's where this lock comes from. And it makes sense because not every gunsmith was making their own locks. As a matter of fact, from what I've heard, a lot of times they were actually ordered clear from England. But not in this case. This is the Philadelphia Lockworks lock. And as I said before, this one's very interesting because it has no half cock. And I assumed it was a mistake of the, or something was wrong with the gun. But you literally can't get back past that much further. You can get back to right there, but there never was a groove there. And this groove is not deep enough to be the half cock. So this is the full cock notch, and there is no half cock all the way down. As I said before, it was not going down. We opened it up and it turned out it was just a little bit rusty right there. And with a little bit of movement, it came right on down. Now, this lock obviously has all its pieces, and I'm going to take this time to look at this trigger. Once again, we have the exact same issue that we had on the other trigger, as in this one is a completely different style of set trigger. That spring keeps wanting to come out when it's not in the stock, but on this one, here's your back trigger, here's your front trigger, and that one goes down and is supposed to lock underneath that one, but once again, the trigger is too rounded off to catch. That's just a common issue, they just wear out. So once again, we're going to have to extend this by heating and hammering, just like we talked about on the other one, but you can still fire this one with the front trigger. It's just going to be quite a task on this particular style of trigger. So no half cock, which surprises me all to pieces, and there's no provision for one to have ever been back there. There's no mark there. It's not like it wore off, it's just not there. This thing is all ready to go as soon as you cock the hammer and you cap it. So that's just the way it works. This is a target rifle, so I don't know if they didn't intend for it to not be carried around in the woods on half cock or what. We're just going to have to be careful with it because you're either on fire or your hammer's down on the cap, which I'm sure some people back in the day didn't see an issue with that. Some people would see a big issue with that today. So there's our lock off the Burns rifle from Ohio and triggers. There's a few other things to note here. Somebody over the years has taken this trigger guard, very old trigger guard, but they misaligned that hole, or they didn't like where that hole was, and they drilled another hole and actually put a old finishing nail in there. That was something that was done much later on, in my opinion. But yeah, they did that on that. It really doesn't matter that much because it doesn't show up on the stock. Okay, so let's look at the stock. You have to be so careful with these things when they are out of the stock because the barrel is what does all the support work. I just noticed something absolutely insane inside the stock. I did not notice this before. This stock has some brakes. This right here needs glued. It's very loose. And there is a break down here that needs glued and it's loose. The stock has been repaired a lot, but somebody, and I don't think I'll dig it out. But let's just take a look at the stock first. We have our patch box, very nicely done. We have our, like I said, this is an Ohio-made rifle, Ohio squirrel rifle. It's a very small caliber. And the toe plate and if you look here, the toe plate has a extension here, so I don't know what's going on, but it's a little too sharp for that wood. It looks like the wood is chipped out on the toe. I would imagine that happened before they added the toe plate. No fancy engraving on this toe plate, no, nothing, but we do have our patch box here, if I can get it open with these gloves on. No engraving, but there is some corrosion in there. Sometimes it's kind of cool, you'll look in these guns and see if somebody's name engraved in there. Not at all uncommon. And I usually look very close at the top because it could have been engraved there. Now, this wrist was broken, and instead of wrapping it with rawhide like some would do, or just gluing and screwing it back into position, if you look down here, it was done right because they actually put a very old bolt with a square-headed nut through it, and then they put this brass overlay over the top, and it's actually done really nicely, inlaid and nailed into position. Now then, back here, we have one of our first markings. Remember I said this was a J.M. Burns? Well, this also happens to be a J.H. Burns. Now, J.H. is the brother, evidently, of J.M., and I've seen a couple of these. Evidently, J.H. Burns marks the side plates, and his name is in the online records that I've read. Like I said, I haven't got a lot of information on these. I'm waiting on some books I got to get, because this one is definitely getting used. And we have our pins there, but one thing I just noticed when I brought this stock out, notice I'm being very careful, there is a centerfire cartridge of some kind stuck right in here, and evidently that's the cap and stop for what they had on this gun, which was a very short ramrod. The ramrod was not long enough. I'm debating right now pulling that out because we're going to put a longer ramrod in this. The ramrod that was there just wasn't long enough to even, you drop it down in the barrel, it disappeared. As a matter of fact, Caleb dropped it in the barrel and it disappeared for good. I'm going to figure out how to get it out of there. But I don't know what caliber that is because it is very small. Almost looks like a 25 auto, and it still has the primer in it.
I see that.
You want to try to get it out of there and see what it says?
Somehow. Give me that screwdriver.
I'm holding this light here because it is broke, but what we found is this is a Remington UMC 25, and it also says 6.35 millimeter on it, so that is a 25 auto shell, and they were using it evidently at some point to hold the tip of the ramrod down there from falling all the way in where they couldn't get hold of it. Now we're going to take this out because obviously we're going to make the proper length of ramrod for this gun, but this will probably always stay with this gun because it's kind of a cool little momentum. Let's get back to looking at the stock.
Still has an unfired primer.
Yeah. Alright, so if you look right here, we are on the left-hand side of the stock, non-lock side. There's obviously a very, very nicely done repair right here. And that tells me somebody cared a lot about this gun, because a lot of times when you see guns like this with chipped out sections of wood right here, where this stock is so super thin, guys, you have to be so careful with these. But they have, and a lot of times when these things chip here, people will just sand them down into a groove. Well, that wasn't done here. Somebody cared enough to take a piece of what looks like pine. It is obviously not the same kind of maple. And they went right here, all the way down there, and came right back up there and repaired it. This was a high-end gun, and I feel like it saw some high-end repair over the last, well, I don't know, 175 years. But going on down, you can see we have our nose cap. One thing we will have to do, obviously, as I said before, not taking any age or patina off these guns, we will clean that corrosion off the end of that nose cap. And that's really all there is for this stock. Once again, guys, if you're messing with these long rifle stocks, super thin, I've actually heard people say, and I believe it, that if you were to grab it out by this end and not hold the stock, it could break under its own weight. Very, very careful with these. Alright, guys. I'll show you the sign of what, in my opinion, makes this, one of the things that makes this a higher end gun. There are 8 moons stamped around the outside of the crown on the end of this barrel. It's a very heavy barrel with a very small hole. And once again, we are looking at 7-groove rifling. Alright guys, so looking at this barrel, we once again have loops, and by the way, these are very much tighter loops right there than the other gun. This is a finer rifle. And we have some rust building up there that we really need to take care of now. That's why when you get these guns, take them apart and clean them. Don't just let them set or you will have a rust bucket. We have our middle and we have our rear. We have one of the finest, absolute finest sights I have ever seen in a rifle. The notch is barely visible. And it's pretty insane how fine that sight is. But remember, this is a target rifle, heavy barreled target rifle, cap lock. That's what this company, Burns, specialized in. So we have that. Now it's where we come to the sad part. Down here on this end, we have a broken tang. Oh my. But not to worry, because this is one of the things we kind of specialize in. We will clean that up. We will weld that old iron back together. By the way, I guarantee you this is an iron barrel, not a steel barrel. And at the same time, we have a stuck nipple in there. We will get that out. So let's take a look at this with our calipers and see exactly what caliber we have here. Alright guys, so we are done with the calipers, and what we found is we have a coned barrel, which at first made it kind of hard to read because it's fairly well coned. The barrel starts out at around 35 caliber between the lands. It goes all the way down to basically 320 in there, so you would shoot a 31 caliber round ball. This is a 32 caliber squirrel rifle. Let me tell you, this is a lot of big gun for a 32. But supposedly these were made in Dayton, Ohio by the J.M. Burns family of gunsmiths, and that is what they specialize in. Heavy barreled target rifles, which is exactly what this is. Now, I've handled the Crockett rifle barrel and things like that before. It is nowhere near as beefy and as much meat in it as this particular barrel. This barrel is not swamped. We're looking at a completely straight barrel, which was pretty common for the era. In the era with this being what I consider to be, like I said before, around 1850. Maybe to 1855, something in that era. So I am not going to put this particular gun back together because this is the one we are starting with. A very nice little 32 caliber squirrel rifle. Well, you know, Caleb, just like what you always wanted. But he wanted it in flint, and unfortunately this one is a cap. But very cool for what it is. It is definitely a gun of its era. These things were made in Dayton, Ohio, and I can just imagine some Ohio farmer had fairly well to do, evidently, got one of these very nice rifles for hunting, for game. In Ohio, as far as I know, if it's anything like the rest of the states east of the Mississippi, about 1850 big game was running out. All they needed was a 32 because they were hunting rabbits and squirrels for the most part, maybe a few deer here and there. But let's talk about what we have to do to this gun. Like I said, I'm not putting it back together, because this one, as soon as we're done filming, actually is going to start the working process. Alright, very first thing we have to do, Caleb needs to take this in the machine shop, clean this up, and re-weld the tang back into place, the most important part. While he's doing that, I am going to have this stock over at my place, and I will be putting it in my wood, on my wood glue table, putting it in the clamps, getting all the small dings glued up on it. After that, we will be taking and polishing the corrosion off of anywhere, but not the patina that needs to be. We will be taking the lock and the trigger down to the bolts, and we will be ultrasonic cleaning it. I will also be taking a file and cleaning up the sharp edges on this hammer. We will be getting the, when Caleb has this in the shop, he will be getting that nipple out, getting it cleaned out. It has a ramrod stuck in it, as we said before. We're going to get that out. And also while he's there, he's going to take this trigger, and we will already have it clear apart and cleaned. And this back trigger needs to be stretched forward just ever so slightly so that it has enough meat to engage the front trigger again. This thing has obviously been set off and pulled so many times in its life, whether it was being fired or someone was just fooling with the set triggers, that it has worn a round spot on that and will no longer grab. So that's the metal work that's going to be done. The woodwork that will be done, we will polish and clean all these screws up, and hopefully this time next week you will see us out shooting this, what is obviously a very fine, even though it's been well used over the years and well taken care of, well repaired, we will be shooting this fine 32 caliber J.M. Burns squirrel rifle, Ohio squirrel rifle. Well, thank you guys for staying with me. I know this wasn't a shooting video. I have a few other videos planned on coming out. I have a few that I owe people. Gray Pilgrim, you're coming, I promise. A Turkey Creek 1823, gotta get that rifle sighted in. Unfortunately, with wind and rain and everything here lately, we haven't been able to get out and make a good video. So, this is what we're doing right now. As always, trust in God, keep your powder dry. Thanks for watching. Bye.